Hello, and welcome to season 3 of the Working While Homeschooling podcast, the podcast for workingwhilehomeschooling.com, where our mission is to help homeschooling parents make money, maybe even have a career while continuing to homeschool and without losing their sanity. My name is Julie. I am your host and resident career coach today. I want to thank you all for joining us and listening in. I hope you're doing well. Today's episode is for our business owners, and we're going to be talking about reviewing your expenses because of tax time. If you're an entrepreneur or business owner, this announcement is for you. Do you have questions about how to get more clients or wonder how you can do more with less? Do you have big, crazy dreams that you're not quite sure how to tackle? Or perhaps you're wondering how you could make a real income doing any of it? If you've said yes to any of the above, you should consider signing up for one of my business entrepreneur coaching sessions. Now, being your own boss is great, but working on your own doesn't mean you have to go it alone. Coaching is going to provide you the accountability and support you need so that you can reap the rewards of being a solo entrepreneur with less doubt, stress, and struggle. So give yourself an edge over the competition. You can check out my one-on-one coaching services at my site or below. It really is time for you to be able to write your own success story. So let me help you. Again, check out the link on my site or below. So yes, business owners out there, this podcast is one of the podcasts especially for you. I just wrapped up finishing our family taxes for the year. It's brutal. Doing taxes is one of my least favorite things about being a grown-up, to be honest. When I'm working on the business portion of our taxes for my coaching business, I realized I have a habit that I really haven't shared with you guys that I think could be useful. I take the opportunity of doing our taxes and organizing all of that paperwork as a chance to review all of my business expenses. So because tax season is upon us, I wanted to remind all of our business owners out there to use this opportunity, now that you've got it all laid out nice and neat for you in your tax paperwork, about reviewing your expenses for the year. I mean, you've just organized all those receipts, all those invoices, you name it. And how can we use this to our advantage to set us up for success for the next year? Well, I have 3 main points I wanted to share with you. First of all, look and see where you can cut or reduce your expenses. Call all those service providers up. Can you get better deals on your internet or your phone line, your liability insurance, whatever it might be? Look through each category of your expenses. Is there anything you can cut or reduce? Have you been paying for subscriptions on things that you frankly don't use? Are you not using your services that you are paying for to the best of your ability? Can't cut the cost. Are you maximizing the use of it so you're getting more out of it? Are there any benefits to that services that you are not taking advantage of? Maybe you can consolidate more than you realize. Call into your service providers and check and see if you're overpaying for things, or if you're paying for services that you are no longer using and you don't plan to use for the next year. This is a good time to cut them out. Remember, every penny that you don't send out is another penny in your pocket as a business owner, right? So number 1, cut or reduce any expenses possible. I would honestly say be kind of cutthroat with that. If you're not planning to take advantage of that this year, in this calendar year, let's get rid of it. You can always add services back later. They always have those great, hey, come back to us and I'll give you a discount deals. But if you aren't planning to use that in the next year, then let's cut it, right? So you can take that money into your pocket. Number 2, review your annual budget. Okay, what were the expenses that you ended up paying for that you really didn't plan on last year? And if you're going to need to continue those expenses this year, you need to account for them in your annual budget. I'll be honest with you, I've been trying to get better about being organized with an annual budget because I like to see how much it cost me to get through the year. I know for many of you solo entrepreneurs, maybe working from your home and so on, you don't really think about that as the annual budget. But I'm encouraging you to make sure you are reviewing, not just what you can cut and reduce, but you're planning for the long term. You're planning through January 1st, 2022. Okay. So it's not just cutting and reduce, but are you taking into account how much it's going to take for you to keep your doors open? One of the things I'm actually trying to get better at myself is kind of pre-planning for that expense. So if I know that Grammarly, for example, I pay for a yearly membership, that's like 100, $120, depending on what deal you get. So if I know that that's going to cost me 120 for the year, and it comes up January 2nd, I want to make sure on December 31st, I have that money already saved in my account. And I'm not waiting till December 30th to worry about, is that money in there? So plan for that in advance, pre-budget, because you know that, hey, I pay for Dropbox, I pay for Grammarly, I pay for my website service, I pay for this. If you know how much it costs you to get through the year, you've cut and condensed as much as you can on your expenses, then you know literally what is the bare minimum it's going to cost you to keep your doors open. That's always my first goal for the year is, hey, let me bring in enough money to pay for the rest of the year. So like when I'm building up my business in January and February, I'm literally looking to pay my expenses for the entire year so that I can spend the rest of the year just putting the money in my pocket. Okay. So I pre-bank money for the phone, the internet, all of that, and kind of shove that into an account and leave it there so those bills can always be paid. I know realistically that's not always the way that we can afford to do business, but I will say that that's worked for me. And why do I say all of that when I'm saying, review your annual budget? Because there's always expenses that pop up in the middle of the year that you didn't account for. So maybe if you've upgraded your internet or so on, you didn't kind of plan on that for your budget for the year. I just want to make sure you plan ahead for the rest of the year, whatever it might be. That way, when the unexpected happens in the middle of the year, you can be okay and take advantage of that because you're not scrambling. That way, when something crazy happens in the middle of the year, it's okay because you're just kind of having to readjust your plan. You're not starting over from scratch. So really review your annual budget. What does this mean? This is how much it cost me to keep my doors open versus this is how much money I brought in last year. And if those numbers are not to my satisfaction, what can I plan for right now for the rest of the year to make a difference, to make a change in that? Number 3, I want you to look at your expenses by the month versus for the entire year. It is really easy to look at those little expenses and piecemeal yourself because it's just $4.99 a month. This is $5.99 a month. This is $7.99 a month. And then all of a sudden, all those little monthly expenses that kind of trickle in, you're thinking, whatever, it's not a big deal. It's just $5.99 a month. It's just this. And then you get to the end of the year and you realize that you're in the red because you piecemealed yourself right out of your budget, not looking at the whole year as an annual expense. So look at each one of those expenses, not only as a monthly expense, this is going to cost me $5.99 a month, but also look at it annually. And especially when I'm such a visual person, I will tell you guys, I love my Excel. Okay, guys. I love laying things out in spreadsheets because, again, very visual. It helps me really see the numbers. And when I'm doing my receipts for the year, I actually go through and kind of put in each one of my invoices and receipts and all of that into spreadsheet columns so that I can see what I spent on every single category of expense for my taxes. A lot of kind of pre-paperwork that makes actually inputting my taxes into that online software very, very easy. But one of the things I've realized when I'm doing that is I kind of get a really quick rundown of how much I'm spending per category. And because I'm very visual and, is very easy for me to kind of piecemeal myself through the year saying, whatever, this is just $5.99 a month. Oh, this is just $6.99 a month. And then all of a sudden you get to the end of the year and you're like, oh my gosh, look at how much money I'm spending. Why did I do that? So again, it sounds very simple. It sounds kind of basic and maybe not worth a podcast. But when I was doing my spreadsheet this year, I realized we haven't had this kind of budget conversation. And I do think as a business owner, it is imperative you do at least a yearly review of your budget. Maybe you change nothing, guys, and that's okay. From last year to this year, I probably won't change many of my expenses. I did see one expense where I think I'm overpaying for my server host because my website server host, because I've changed my websites in the past year or so. And I don't think I'm actually using as much as I'm paying for. So yes, I have a call into them to see if I can reduce that one expense down. Otherwise, frankly, we're doing pretty good. So, there's not much I have to change for this year, but that does set my finances up. And mentally, my finances are set up well, great. So I can move on and see, where can I afford to build the next thing? Can I afford to add on this great expense for the year? If I do another virtual conference, can I afford to kind of invest into that side of this business this year? So to me, budgeting is kind of like the DMV. It's one of those things you have to do. And so let's just get it out of the way, right? Do your budget, make sure you schedule an annual appointment for yourself, bare minimum. And I like to do that around tax time because heck, I'm already doing it for the taxes anyway. So once you kind of get everything sent off to Uncle Sam, go back, as much as we never want to look at any of that nonsense again, go back to that spreadsheet where you've laid everything out in your lovely little columns like I do, and look at where your expenses are coming in. Is there something you can cut and reduce? Are you accounting for all of your expenses? Did you spend a lot more last year than you thought you did that you didn't really account for or budget for? And I'm not saying that that's necessarily bad. I spent a lot more than I accounted for last year, but I also added on a virtual conference and created a book and kind of ran up some expenses because I'm expanding portions of my business. That is okay. And I'm not saying that you have to do anything in that step. I just think as a business owner, we need to keep our eye on everything. And this is one of those ways to do that. And then I want you to look at all of your expenses, not just as a monthly expense where it's the $5.99 a month or $3.99 a month or whatever it is, but look at the annual cost. And sometimes for me, when I look at that annual cost, it looks very differently in my head when I say, oh, that $5.99 really does add up. And you know what? I think I really used that once last year, and that's not worth me spending $80 a year on versus $5.99 a month. It just, $5.99 a month, you just don't think about it. So when you kind of look at all of that and you get the big picture of your business financially, I think it's very, very useful as you plan ahead. So whenever it is that you do your taxes each year, know that once you send it off to Uncle Sam, you are not done. You need to sit yourself down with a cup of coffee or your favorite whatever, clear your mind, and think financially about your business as well. I think it's really easy for us entrepreneurs, frankly, to get stuck in the day-to-day morass of running the business and trying to bring in money. And it's really hard for us to kind of step back and step aside and view that bigger picture. So that's all this really is for you to set an appointment for yourself annually to go have that big picture meeting financially with yourself. Or at least it's one of those things. I, as a business owner, frankly, this is not my favorite part of my job. But it's just I think the bigger picture gives me perspective for the upcoming year. Now, as we wrap up our episode today, I want to thank you all for listening in. There are a ton of great podcasts out there, but you chose to spend your time here with me, so thank you. In the show notes, you will find the links to my site, workingwhilehomeschooling.com, and all of the great ways you can connect with me online. If you enjoyed today's podcast, consider becoming one of our listener supporters by following the links in our show notes. A small monthly donation helps me continue with great content and interviews like you've heard here today on the Working While Homeschooling podcast. Your positive online reviews, subscribing to the podcast, sharing it with your friends, all greatly appreciated as well. And if you know someone that you think would be a great guest of our podcast, please let me know at julie@workingwhilehomeschooling.com. Thank you for listening in today, and please make sure you're joining us in our Facebook group for continuing conversation on today's topic and beyond. I look forward to seeing each of you soon at our next podcast for Working While Homeschooling.